I would like to call to order this regular board meeting of the North County Transit District for October 17, 2019. And Anthony, please call the roll.
Yes, sir. Jack Feller.
Here.
Tony Krantz.
Here.
Judy Ritter. Paul McNamara. Here. Jim Desmond. Here. Dave Drucker. Here. Jewel Edson. Here. Sharon Jenkins. Here. Priya Bhat Patel.
Okay, very good. Now if you'll rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And Anthony Flores, the clerk of the board, will now provide a safety brief and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. In the event of emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please do so using the stairs. Do not use the elevator. Once outside, please do not re-enter the building unless told to do so by emergency personnel. We have fire extinguishers on each floor of this building. We also have a portable defibrillator on the first floor and staff on hand trained in CPR procedures. That concludes my safety brief, sir.
Okay, thank you. And are there any changes to the agenda?
No, sir.
All right, we do have a public speaker today for oral communication. If Joan Brown would come to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Joan Brown, and I'm legally blind. I cannot read script or the newspaper or see my iPhone and or read the bus schedule if I don't have my phone. And what I'd like to talk about today is the Carlsbad connector. I've tried to find out information about this since I heard about it, and I was so happy. Oh boy, now I can go into get some of these places I want to go to, because I do everything by bus because I have an ADA pass and I have a script for the cabbie also. But every time I go to the store with Uber or Script, it costs me $25 round trip. You know, so that's kind of losing the whole point of the whole thing. So that's why I take public transportation. So when I heard that Carlsbad had a connection, oh, then I found out you have to have the app. So I put the app in. It doesn't take it right away. It takes me some time to put that app in. And then when I get into the app, it's showing me bus schedules on Loker. And that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to a plumbing place, the Ferguson Plumbing. Because if I let my plumber do it, it's an extra $100. So I thought, I'm going to go over there. Well, I don't know how to do it. When I called, someone said, oh, you have to take the coaster and then you have to make it like the lift. I have to do it all by reservation and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, this is public transportation. This is not public transportation. So the Carlsbad connector might be for people who want to go to lunch or don't want to drive. But if they have a car, they're going to drive. I mean, I'm sorry, but I've got too many young people around me to know that they're not going to be taking a connector if they don't have to. So I would say if we're going to do this, which I thought is a good idea, because I'd like to go to the outlets and I'd like to go to that Costco. I like that Costco. And I'd like to go to places, but I think there should be one bus that goes all the way down Pelham Airport, which turns into San Marcos Boulevard. And that should be just a straight line. And then catch up with the 309. And if you want little shuttles to take people, I wanted to take a bus there, like your 445 line or 4 something. And it goes one way to Pelham Airport College, Palomar College. And then if you take one at 8:15, it doesn't come back. So I'd be stranded there. So anyway, I'm very unhappy with the Carlsbad connector, and I think that has to be worked on and probably should connect with the 101 bus.
Thank you,
Thank
Joan.
you.
Appreciate the feedback. And we have another public speaker, Lucas Curlin.
Hi, thank you for being here. I just wanted to quickly ask, I know that there's a lot of work going on in different cities like Encinitas and other places with road changes, streetscape. They're working on something in El Camino Real. And I'm not sure if this is going on, and if it is, it's great. But I did want to suggest that NCTD work to collaborate with local jurisdictions that are doing changes to their road networks to try to include different kinds of transit prioritization, maybe queue jumper lanes or bus lanes or things of that nature, because I think that that would go far to complementing the work that MTS is doing in trying to improve their network and increase ridership in the area. Thanks.
Thank you. I suspect we're going to have some comments to that end in the executive director's comments. So thank you very much. All right, moving on. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes for the special and regular board meetings of September 19th? Motion from Edson and second, board member Jenkins. That's right.
On the motion of Board Member Joel Edson, seconded by Board Member Sharon Jenkins to approve the minutes of the special and regular board meetings held on September 19th, 2019. Motion passes with all board members present, with the exception of Carlsbad, Priyabhat Patel, absent.
Thank you. Moving on to consent items 1 through 7. Do we have a motion for approval, or is there?
So moved. Second.
All right, a motion by Board Member Duker, a second by Vice Chair Feller.
On the motion of Board Member Dave Druker, seconded by Board Vice Chair Jack Feller to approve consent items 1 through 7. Motion passes with all board members present voting yes, with the exception of Carlsbad, Priyabhat Patel, absent.
Thank you. Next, there are 5 informational items, and the first up is item number 8, receive monthly intergovernmental affairs reports. Matthew O. Tucker, the executive director, will introduce this item.
Richard Harmon will provide this presentation. Ready to roll, Richard?
I am ready to roll. Let me unlock it with my face here. Good afternoon, Richard Harmon with Townsend Public Affairs. As always, it's a pleasure to be here to provide a report. I know I've been here a few times this year, but it feels like forever because I think it's been a couple months since summer, but wanted to provide a summary based on the governor's actions as of last weekend, which was his deadline to act on legislation. Maybe a little bit of a peek ahead for next year, but it's still a little bit early for what may be going on. But let me jump in. So as I mentioned, last weekend was the deadline for the governor to either sign, veto, or not act on legislation, which was October 13th. The legislature wrapped up on September 13th of this year with all of their work. There was a little bit of drama this year on the last night of legislative session when some material was thrown from the balcony. You know, vaccine legislation this year was a big issue, and you know, passions run pretty high. So there was some disruption on the last night of session, which caused the Senate to have to evacuate the Senate floor and actually convene in a large committee room because of the hazardous material on the floor of the state Senate. So a little bit of disruption there, but they did complete their work. The governor just completed his work over the weekend. Next big deadline's coming up January 6th. The legislature will be back in session. Being the second year of a 2-year session, there was a lot of legislation that did not make it out this year. Much of it didn't even make it out of its first house, either the Assembly or Senate. We call those 2-year bills. They'll be worked on, and there's a key deadline for those at the end of January 2020 for those to actually advance out of their initial house of introduction. So we'll see a flurry of activity at the beginning of the year for all those authors who, for whatever reasons, opposition or their ideas just weren't fully cooked, to try to move their items out as opposed to introducing something new in the next year. So January of the even-numbered year is always pretty busy. This also marks the not the end, but I guess maybe the legislative session end of the governor's first year in office. And I know we've spoken over the year about actions he's done on housing, statements he's made. He started off the year making some pretty bold statements on housing production. I think it was 2.5 million plus new units wanted to see produced. High-speed rail, wanting to see an increased focused investment in the Central Valley to get a segment operating. But what we've seen over the year with his comments, there were threats of taking SB1 money if cities and counties weren't in compliance with meeting their targeted goals for housing production, which kind of morphed into this collaborative approach. And I know some of you were involved. He had a meeting in February in Long Beach where he said, hey, how can we work together toward this goal? And I know a lot of folks who went to that meeting and said it was very collaborative. He was asking questions, he was listening, giving feedback. So we went from, we're going to take all your money if you don't comply, to how can we help you and be a partner to help you apply. And then as the year moved on, he talked about incentives for pro-housing policies. And in fact, just today, the Department of Housing and Community Development released their draft framework of what they mean by pro-housing policies. So it just came out late this morning. I've not read it yet, but they have a survey online, and it should have been distributed to most of the cities, counties for feedback. So we'll see what sort of policies they consider pro-housing and how we can access some of those incentives. We also saw SB 50 this year, which was the bill that would have provided for additional housing around transit stations, stalled this year to the surprise of many, particularly because it could have been maybe a cornerstone of what the governor wanted to do. It fit in so well with his goals. And I think a lot of people were surprised that it did stall with little help from the administration. And whether that's because, it's a new governor still getting his feet under him, or if there's other reasons for that, we'll see in the next year, but they clearly will be back as they continue to work on how to do more dense housing around transit. And something here late, actually in August, there was a report from the Housing Community Development Department on developer impact fees that was directed by legislation last year that looked at local agencies around the state and what was being charged for developments. And as you can probably imagine, a wide range of fees from very low to very high. And the report sort of highlighted, what's the rationale? Why are they range so much? Which caused me concern because I could see that as the state looks for scapegoats on why housing is so expensive, why it's not getting built. Here's an initial report that says, look at these fees. Do our local agencies even know what they're charging these fees for, what go into the fees? So toward that end, the author of that legislation has introduced new legislation that's going to tackle impact fees and what goes into them. And they're doing some listening sessions. So just announced last week, there are some listening sessions around the state. The bill is AB 1184, if any of your cities or county get some wind of it, but they're doing some listening sessions about what goes into your fee makeup. Should the state be more involved in standardizing some of these fees, et cetera? So it's something to watch really closely, because when housing numbers aren't meeting the targets the governor sets out, I just have this feeling they're going to start looking for, who are the problems in not making this happen. More focused on the transportation side, this governor did appoint a new transportation secretary. And feel free to interrupt me at any time with questions. I'm happy to answer. A new transportation secretary, David Kim, who many of you may know from Washington, D.C. He was the longtime government affairs staffer for the Department of Transportation. So anytime he did those D.C. trips, went in to talk to DOT about projects, it was usually David Kim you talked to. I think he did a short stint at Hyundai, if I'm correct. But he's come from California, and he's been on the job, I think, about a month or so. I've met with him a couple times recently. He's still getting his wits about him and what's going on in the state. This governor's also had the opportunity within the last month to appoint 2 new California Transportation Commission members. So I think they're both from the LA area, Tamika Butler and I think Hillary Norton. And then just last week, Commissioner James Gilmetti from the Bay Area, who's been on for 16 years, stepped down and has been reappointed to the High-Speed Rail Board of Directors, basically opening up another spot for this governor to help sort of craft that Transportation Commission into something that, you know, will likely support some of his goals, including his recent executive order, which some of you may have heard of in September. He issued an executive order on climate change investments and how to leverage pension investments, transportation investments to further climate change policies. And on its face, you know, it said we, you know, to comply with all other provisions of law, you know, we want to just pursue this. So to me, it was nothing earth-shattering. It's just establishing a policy. We're going to keep pursuing climate change investments. But consecutive with that, there's been some work at the state regarding the Interregional Transportation Improvement Program, the ITIP, which is part of the State Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, where this has come out at the same time, and they've deleted some projects in the Central Valley and said, hey, we want to reserve these funds for some rail projects. So sort of a confluence of issues, you know, wanting to put transportation money toward climate change policies, taking some money away from actually freeway widening projects in the Central Valley has caused a lot of folks to sort of react and say, hey, this is moving SB1 monies away from projects they were meant for. Honestly, I believe a lot of this is just really kind of poor timing. And I think there's a way out of it. The governor is headlining an event in Fresno at the beginning of November, an economic summit. And I think it's in everyone's best interest that they fully fund some of these Central Valley projects and the issue kind of goes away. But we'll see how that happens. The governor last weekend did veto a bill, you may be aware of, Senate Bill 5, which many have called redevelopment 2.0, although it's something a little bit different than redevelopment. It establishes a different process. There's some state investment involved. He did veto the bill, worried about the state exposure. I think it was up to $2 billion a year the state could be exposed to at full implementation. So that was his reason for vetoing it. But it went hand in hand in a lot of the comments he's made over the last couple of weeks about the economy and his position that economy is slowing down. Of course, he came in this year with what he saw was a $24 billion record surplus. So, you know, there was really no hard decisions this year. Everyone kind of got what they wanted. There was a lot of budget requests for individual projects. He's sort of laying the groundwork for, it's almost Jerry Brown-esque that, hey, economy is going to slow down. It can't be sustained at this level. It's going to slow down. We need to be prepared for it. So he did veto some legislation, SB 5, but he also vetoed some legislation that would have allowed transportation projects. So if you think of like the 710 freeway in Los Angeles County, they purchased housing 40 years ago as they attempted to expand that. And now that the project's not going forward, there's precedent for selling those properties and allowing that funding to go back into the local project alternatives. So we're not doing the 710 extension, but we're doing a series of local projects. And let's use that funding from the sale of housing to fund it. It's been done before under previous governors. There were 2 instances this year, I believe, and Governor Newsom vetoed both and said the general fund needs these funding. This came out of the highway funds we receive, should go back in the general fund. So Ana Mato Santos, who was previously Department of Finance Director under Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown, who's a pretty strict budgetarian. She's Governor Newsom's cabinet secretary and has a heavy hand in some of this budgeting. So all of these signs point to, you know, a governor who's looking into the next year or two and saying revenues are going to be tight. We're going to have to make sure we kind of toe the line. And as you know, he didn't do a lot of ongoing program increases this year, a lot of one-time investments. So we'll be watching that closely next year to see how revenues shape up. So there was one bullet item for you. I'm just kidding. So, and as I mentioned, policy discussions, we're going to continue to talk about transportation and housing around transit. I'll mention this in my next slide, transit pass programs, as well as local agency housing finance tools. So SB 5 was vetoed. Clearly, the League of California Cities was very much involved in that with Senator Bell to get that approved. Sort of what comes out next, we'll be watching. But back to the transit pass program. We had talked previously this year about perhaps some changes to how transit pass programs are operated. The Assembly Transportation Committee has directed a study be done by UCLA this year, and I don't have an update from the chair of the committee yet, but we're expecting by the end of the year UCLA to have completed a study of what sort of programs are operating in the state. Are there some best practices? What should the state be doing at a policy level? So our expectation is that next year we'll be able to talk about transit passes. As you recall, there's an issue with some of the funding that's used for these programs for subsidies that impact our collection and what those numbers look like. So we'd like to see some tweaks. And concurrently with this, there are discussions between the legislature and the Transit Association on the Transportation Development Act, the TDA, and are there some overall systematic changes, programmatic changes that should be done to that? And I think that's supposed to be completed by the end of the year as well. Also looked at a couple bills this year related to access and accommodations. Assembly Bill 1351 ultimately was signed by the governor. This originally had started out as a much more far-reaching bill, but finally ended up that the state is required to initiate a study of the various processes that local transit districts and others have for approved impaired transit riders and visitors. So if someone travels to another part of the state, what is the reciprocity between those transit districts? It was an issue raised by the author. This bill basically requires the transportation agency to do a study and report back with some guidelines and recommendations of what might be some best practices for more statewide uniformity in how reciprocity works. Assembly Bill 752, again, was one that was scaled back from previous versions of it this year. Requires lactation rooms at transit stations. It basically calls out about 10 or 12 large transit stations around the state, including Santa Fe Depot and San Diego. It would include some with NCTD that link up rail with local bus service. However, the trigger for when you would have to include some of this is if you were doing a renovation that exceeds more than like 25% of your square footage of a transit. So significant renovations to the indoor area of your facility. So much more limited in scope. And then SB 397, which deals with best practices for allowing pets on vehicles or evacuation orders, which I think NCTD already has a good practice for. Equipment and safety, our local assembly member had a bill that basically if a city or county local district says, we want to make some improvements to our grade separations for mobility, connectivity, et cetera. If we pass a resolution to that end, the state PUC is required to assign an engineer and come down and talk to us about improvements, how we can make that work. This again was narrowed down significantly from earlier versions, sort of to force the hand of PUC, like, hey, you have to dedicate the resources. If a city has passed a resolution, say want to talk about grade separation, safety, and some improvements, you have to assign someone and go down and talk to them. One that didn't move forward, I won't spend time on, talked about fully automated transit vehicles and making sure you have a live person riding along with them. Assembly Bill 413, I apologize, I just noticed now I included a short sentence, but there's actually more in this bill that I will talk about. This bill actually extends some of what was in AB 805 a couple years ago to Placer County and Solano County, and including the requirement on project labor agreements. But what the author is really trying to get at here is you have areas that want to impose additional taxes. There may be not the support, and we've talked about this in previous meetings, the 2/3 vote threshold on getting those approved. This would allow you to identify areas in that jurisdiction that may be more deserving or needing transit improvements. So the message you would be telling voters is, hey, you know, these pockets are in need of improvements. You articulate what those improvements are. That's where those tax dollars will be spent. I was a little surprised the governor signed this. I think this is a bill that Governor Brown probably would have vetoed because from a legal perspective, I think a judge currently, the whole county would vote on this. So even if you're saying these 3 areas are going to be the recipients of these tax dollars, does that still go to the full county for a vote? or does it go to just those impacted areas for a vote? The bill does not specify. So I think there's a lot of ambiguity and lack of clarity in the bill. Similarly, if you're someone who lives in that county but are not in one of the areas receiving tax dollars, what happens about if you travel into that area every day, you're impacting transit and roads in that area, yet you're not being taxed for that use. So I think there's a whole lot of question marks in this. I have a feeling the folks added into the bill, Placer County, Solano County, Placer County especially, where you have pockets, you have Placerville, you have South Lake Tahoe, where there is room for transit improvements, but the vast majority of the county is more rural, doesn't utilize those services. I think this is sort of the target. So maybe that's the test case of how this might work out. So we'll see. I wish I had more answers, but again, I think if Jerry Brown had still been in office, this might have been one just because that lack of clarity and questions about the legal perspective may have been vetoed. We talked about AB 1785. It didn't move forward this year. This was one we were talking about fatalities and injuries in right-of-way and legal actions. Ms. Borna Horvath did introduce a piece of legislation. It did not move forward this year. So I think those are all I have highlighted. There's a few more I know in my monthly report. We do have a couple slides that Katie's going to help me with on some of the funding updates. So if you'd like, maybe she can join me now. We can do those, or if you have other issues, yeah, of course.
Remember Desmond?
Yeah, the previous slide there, we were it requires project labor agreements and transit construction project over 1 million. That's still part of it?
It is. Yeah, I apologize. I apologize on the language of this one. It is still part, and it basically was the foundation of the whole bill for a good part of the year. That was part of AB 805 for us down here. This extends it statewide. So any projects over $1 million, you're required to have the PLA. So it was a statewide application of that piece of AB 805. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So what else? I'll still be here for
I'll just quickly go over the projects that we submitted recently. So we requested funding for 2 replacement locomotives through the Air Pollution Control District's Clean Air Grant Program, which was submitted in September. And then today we submitted to the Caltrans Transportation Planning Grant Program for the Breeze Speed and Reliability Study. Our biggest push coming up is the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, which will be working with our regional partners, LOSAN, SANDAG, and MTS to develop a regional submittal to that program. And that's due in January. And then in terms of federal programs, we are still waiting to hear back on the Bus and Bus Facilities Program, which we submitted for funding for 10 CNG buses. SANDAG submitted on our behalf for funding for the Del Mar Bluffs Phase 5 in July. And then we submitted with Metrolink and Amtrak and LOSAN for the Mobility on Demand program, which is an integrated payment app. And then the next federal program that's coming up is our State of Good Repair program through the Federal Railroad Administration, which we're still developing, but that's due in December. And that's all I have.
I'm also happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, looks like you're up.
I just want to make sure that
Got that.
Perfect.
All right.
Well,
Thank you,
You
Richard.
know where to find me.
Yes, sir. All right, this is informational item, so no vote required. Moving on to item 9, to review the status of the FY 2019 Strategic Business Initiatives results. Karen Tukolsky.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So Mr. Krantz noted, the topic is reviewing the results of our business initiatives from fiscal 19. Before I go ahead and dive into that, I want to just give a little bit of background and context. The district has identified 10 strategic areas of focus, and these are kind of what I like to think of as the very high-level overarching guiding principles to everything that we're doing. You'll see them in a lot of different places. For example, on the staff reports, you'll notice a goal strategic direction listed on all the staff reports, and that's one of those 10 items. So we really try to tie everything that we do into these high categories, high priorities. So the business initiatives themselves are specific activities that we identify as we're developing and going through the annual budget process. And those are big, high-level, high-priority activities that fall into one of those buckets. Now, not every goal or focus is necessarily going to have an activity under it in any given year. Some may have one, some may have none, some may have several. So you'll see that as I'm going through. And then again, these are big activities. So they're not necessarily all standalone 1 year. A lot of these are maybe 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 years. So as we move forward, when we come back and talk about FY20, some of these may crop back up again or even in FY21. So that's just kind of the high level context I want to give as I dive through these. In fiscal 19, we had 16 different business initiatives across 8 different areas. Most of these, if not all, I think you've probably heard about either in board meetings, committee meetings, workshops, or other different forums that we've had. So I'm going to hit pretty much high level summaries and status items on each of these. But obviously, if you have any questions, you need any information, just flag me down, stop me, ask a question. Certainly we want to give you the information that you need. So the first one is enhanced safety and security. There's 2 items under this area. First is to implement a citation management program. And this relates to enforcement of our board ordinances. So right now, if a citation is written, it goes through the local court system for administrative processing and handling. This is basically developing an internal administrative citation program to bring that process in-house. So we are currently getting the draft scope of work under development, and we're looking to post the RFP in early calendar 2020. Both these items that I'm mentioning, safety and security, are being led by Sean Lufborough, our Chief of Safety and Security. Second item I know you heard about earlier this year was to conduct a safety culture assessment. So this is an activity that we do every 3 years. It's part of our ISMSP, Integrated Safety Management System Plan. And this was basically a survey of all NCTD and all the contractor employees getting feedback on our overall safety programs, policies, and procedures. So that study was conducted, and Sean and his team have the results. We presented earlier this year, and he and his team are now working on implementation of some of the takeaways and the opportunities for improvement in our programs, policies, processes, anything that was identified, for us to move forward on. He's in the process of implementing that with his team now. So next item is improve community partnerships, and we have 3 different initiatives. 2 top ones here that you see are TOD-focused, transit-oriented development projects. Solana Beach TOD, which has been on our radar for a while. We are currently in negotiations with the city of Solana Beach to sign an MOU, which would identify the city as the lead for the project advancement. And then relative to Oceanside Transit Center TOD, Tracy Foster, Chief Development Officer, gave a robust presentation last month talking about that project in detail. Short takeaway and quick reminder for today is that we are working with our real estate consultant to develop the RFP and expect to have that posted before the end of this calendar year. And then the last item, complete a land use and transit integration study. So this is a study that looks into local development plans and helps us identify opportunities to implement effective transit options. IBI Group has been working on this since last year. I know they've presented, I think, at a retreat, and we've had it mentioned other times as well. So they're pretty much almost done. We're looking to have this done within the next month, and I'm sure you're going to be hearing more about it as we have those results finalized. Ridership revenue and customer service. We have 5 different initiatives under this area. Implementing customer relationship management application. So this is about replacing our currently antiquated database for our customer feedback with a new web-based software system. In April of this year, the board awarded a contract to Crow. They're going to be implementing a program through Microsoft Dynamics. and we are well underway in implementation. They're heavy into their build phase, and we're looking to have our beta version ready before the end of this year and then be able to go live next year. So moving along nicely with that one. Upgrading the website. I know you're all aware that we launched our upgraded and improved website in April this year. Vastly improved functionality over the prior ones, responsive site, much better features and service overall. So that was another good news story. And then updating our marketing and communications plan. This was another item that we have made some good progress on. So in collaboration with Southwest Strategies, who's our marketing consultant, we developed a 5-year strategic marketing and communications plan, which we put out last October. And so now we're in the process of actually rolling out implementation on a formal campaign. We have a new campaign that we're calling our Zero Delay program. We just had a good discussion in the MISPEDA committee about it. And I know you're all going to hear more about it soon. So again, this is something that we're making progress on. Noted, this is a 5-year strategic plan. So this is something that isn't, again, a 1 or 2 year project. It's going to be something that's going on over the coming years, and we're going to continue to advance and evolve. The fourth item under ridership revenue and customer service is to implement a customer wayfinding program. So if you've been at any of our transit stations, you probably know that wayfinding can be challenging, daunting, and depending on how familiar you are with their system, potentially very frustrating. Our signage and our directional information varies from station to station. Some has more than others. Some doesn't have a lot. It doesn't necessarily all even look the same where we do have it. And this, of course, can be challenging for a regular rider. Certainly they pick it up after a while, but for a new rider, people new to the system, not an inviting or encouraging way to help bring them in and try to get them as return customers. So we had awarded a contract for development and recommendations for full specifications for a wayfinding program. That plan is substantially completed. It was done by the end of fiscal 19, and we are now in the process of looking for funding to go ahead and implement the plan. It's a great design, got a lot of new features, and it'll really bring things together. So we're actively looking for the funding and hope to move that action into real implementation.
Remind me how much funding it would be necessary to implement the program.
5 or 7.
Yes, between $5 and $7 million for full implementation.
And that includes electronic signage, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
Up to date, next bus type things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to implement it over a phased approach. I'm getting the first review of our draft capital improvement budget tomorrow. And so when we come to the board, I think in November or December with the capital improvement program, we will be funding elements of the wayfinding project. It's too big to bite off at one bite.
And the last item under this area is to conduct a comprehensive operations analysis. So this is about analyzing transit services from both users and non-users. This actually kind of follows up and links with the land use study that I had just mentioned, which IBI is wrapping up. So we actually got funding from Caltrans for the study, and to keep in theme with our challenging acronyms, we have renamed it the Strategic Multimodal Transit Implementation Plan, or the SMTIP. And we have a contract that was awarded. It also was awarded to IBI through the competitive process, and they've started work. So good news for that is that they are very familiar with us, and having done the land use and transit study, that gives them a really quick learning curve to help get up to speed and have that continuity of knowledge as we're moving ahead into this study. And the outcome of this will be looking for actual real service plans that can address gaps in service and different transit opportunities for NCTD. Improve financial health. So we had 2 items under here. First was obtaining services of a financial advisory service firm to talk about a capital finance program. We had PFM Financial as our advisor, and they came in and did a very detailed presentation earlier this year. Lots of good information on market conditions and different financing options. And based on that information, NCTD's actually decided to focus our efforts on cash flow management and pursuing discretionary grants rather than looking at debt financing for our state of good repair needs. So you've heard about some of our discretionary grant applications just a few minutes ago, and that's something you're going to continue to hear about as we continue to leverage those opportunities as well. And then second item under here is fair program management. As you recall, MTS had led procurement for a new regional fare system. That was a contract that's been awarded to INIT, and NCT has joined in on that. So we had our staff through our IT division engage one of our on-call consultants to go ahead and take a look at a comprehensive analysis of what NCTD's specific requirements are for our region, for our services, for our customers, make sure that any gaps that may exist between what MTS already had procured and what we NCTD and our customers need are addressed and included in, in that final process and in that agreement. And there's some items that we're of course going to be working directly within it on that, we need that may not be MTS specific needs. But that one, in terms of the analysis, has been completed and now it's moving into the implementation phase. And as a reminder, that system is targeted to be coming on board in summer of 2021. So still a couple of years out, but with technology, the time goes fast and it's a lot to do to stand up a whole new fare system. Intergovernmental affairs. Successfully execute the executive legislative program under discretionary grant strategies. We just heard from Richard and Katie on some of those items. And specifically with our discretionary grant status in fiscal 19, we had some very good success. Top of our list, we were pleased to get funding of $6.13 million from the state for our bluff stabilization needs over in Del Mar. We also received money from the LCTOP program for zero emission buses, money from Sandag for lift vehicles, and again, the SMTIP, we received money from Caltrans to help us conduct that study. So again, good results in that area. It's something we're going to continue to look to and to focus on in years ahead. All right, successfully implement projects. So positive train control implementation, of course, was our biggest project. And I know you're all aware that NCTD was only one of 4 railroads in the nation to fully implement PTC by the December 31st, 2018 deadline. Eric Rowe and his team did great work with that, worked really hard, getting not just NCTD, but all of our tenant railroads up and running on the PTC system. So we're pleased to have that important safety feature out there and active on our rail corridor. And SM management and state of good repair. So the goal for here is to develop a transit asset management plan, or the TAM, by October of 2018. And that is something that we did complete. We brought our consultants, WSP, on board. They helped us complete the plan. We've done an inventory and asset condition assessment. So we're well in the way of activating that planning, keeping it moving forwards. We're currently developing an enterprise asset management system, working on standing operating procedures, and of course conducting training so that all those involved in carrying out the different activities under the TAM are fully trained and understand what their responsibilities are and how to perform those. Last but not least, under accountability and performance management, we're looking to implement a performance dashboard. So this is about putting out on our website publicly available information, and we have been putting up a lot of different information via different links and different tabs and sections. But what we really want to do is get a big performance dashboard out there so that people can go to the dashboard and see the different categories and kind of have that visual perspective of the different things, and then they can drill down and get more information or go to one of the other reports if they want some more detailed information. So this project is still in process. We do have a framework developed, but we have a lot of data and a lot of different data sources that we're currently in the process of verifying, making sure that we're pulling the right data from the right place and getting all that up to speed. So we're looking for completion by the end of fiscal year 2020 in June. So that is it for me. I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, I don't have any speaker slips, so Board Member Edson.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for the report. I have just one question, and Matt may end up answering this, I'm not sure. With the $2.24 million from the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program for ZEBs, are we required to go electric, or can that be hydrogen?
So right now, as it stands, those dollars are going to be programmed towards the electric bus program. we're going to be standing up a separate program for hydrogen buses, and those dollars are also eligible for that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Vice Chair Feller.
I just want to make sure that you and Mrs. Brown are able to understand what she needs to accomplish to go along with her goals. I didn't want to comment on the item that wasn't on the agenda, but this was in this respect. And she, you know, my mother she reminds me just exactly of my mother that is visually impaired. And so just whatever you can do to help her understand how to use this app.
Absolutely.
And maybe I'll have somebody explain it to me too.
No problem.
Very good. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Tucker is going to review item number 10, which is to receive a presentation regarding complete streets and walking paths.
Katie is going to quarterback on this, but as she comes up, I do want to make sure I make a couple of notes on this. In terms of the actual agenda item today, we're not asking the board to approve anything. This is purely an informational item. With respect to the point 2 under this informational item, it's my intent to communicate directly with the city managers and the city staff in terms of the discussion on them assuming a greater role and responsibility for the funding for this. I also want to note the email communication that I received from the city manager from Escondido expressing some feedback about the plan to make this request to the city. There were all city managers from North County were on that email string. Subsequent feedback was shared with me regarding their thoughts about this. I intended to move forward with this discussion on our board level anyway, because again, this is just an informational item. And I think as we go through this discussion today, it really is an important discussion for us to have relative to how can we best move forward with the whole concept of improving mobility regardless of how you're traveling, and what roles and responsibilities should belong to the cities versus what role and responsibility and focus NCTD should have, and what things should we try to come together on together to try to leverage. Likely, this is going to be one of those things where we're going to all have to come together and leverage, but it's a very good discussion topic with the understanding that so much of what happens in terms of development from a city level or the county level impacts our ability to deliver high quality, high performing transit services. So with that, I'll turn it over to Katie.
Ann Fox, the District Deputy Director of Planning and Local Assistance, will give a presentation on the benefits of complete streets and some available funding opportunities in the state. And then I will follow that up with a presentation on the document that we've attached today.
Great, thank you. And I appreciate the ask by Mr. Tucker to come in and present and talk a little bit about what we are doing in Caltrans and our Complete Street program, and how we can, as Matt was talking about, leverage our projects and work together to move them forward. So a little bit by the numbers. I know there's a lot of text on here, but there is some numbers in there. Over the past, 2000 to 2012, what we're seeing is that walking and bicycle trips have doubled. And that constitutes nearly 20% of all trips in California. Most of the discussions that I'll be referring to are statewide information based on our state's information and programming for that. On the downside of that, the tragedy of the more exposure to walking and bicycling is that we're seeing that those folks walking and biking are killed or seriously injured in California at a much higher rate than car drivers or passengers based on the percentage of trips and relative miles traveled. What we're seeing again statewide is pedestrian deaths are increasing. over the past decade, 27%. So pedestrian deaths increasing 27%, while vehicle deaths are on the decrease of 14%. And a lot of that is the a lot of the safety initiatives are geared towards vehicles and drivers and passengers, where we have many of the improvements are for wider roads, which there's then faster speeds, even including just improved safety features on your vehicles. On the other side, we also have, the introduction of many more distractions and having those distracted drivers then also sharing the roadways with our bikes and peds. So talking a little bit and just kind of defining it for Caltrans and our Complete Streets. So a complete street is a transportation facility that's planned, designed, and operated for all users, including bikes, peds, transit vehicles, and being inclusive of motorists. And putting that in context, this is at all levels. Whether that's to and from your neighborhoods or along a corridor, or even place types such as destinations. It could be in a downtown business district too. What we're seeing is that the need for complete street policies, it allows communities and neighborhoods to be more livable, ensuring that we can safely go where we need to go. So whether that's to our parks, our libraries, our grocery stores, our work, that we can all arrive safely. And it does allow then for an improved quality of life, more of that neighborhood feel too. So talking about some of the benefits of complete streets, we're currently in an age where we do want to see and we hear about increasing our transportation choices. So what can we do? How can we get out of our vehicles, and what are those options available to us? It also allows for improved safety for all. A lot of these improvements are making sure we have, the connected sidewalks. We have ADA accessible curb ramps. It could be that we have proper transit corridors through there. Bus shelters. All of that is included in the safety for all users. It also goes towards the reduction of greenhouse gases and improved air quality. More walking and biking allows for improved public health. What we're seeing, again, statewide, our numbers are half of all trips are 3 miles or less. So having a good walking, biking, and transit is essential in moving us across there. It also includes economic revitalization, so allowing us to get from our neighborhoods into our business districts, and having those accessible places. So where are we with our Caltrans commitment, and how can we do better? We've had in place since 2008, and then we've updated it in 2014, a deputy directive, one of our policy statements regarding the need to provide, to plan for and provide for the needs of travelers of all ages and abilities. Within that policy, there's a lot of shoulds and do goods in there, but we need to continue to add more teeth to what it is that our ultimate goals are. Kind of then following along, in 2015, the department put together our strategic management plan, and there we put in performance measures and goals. One of those being to triple bicycling, double our walking, and double our transit trips by 2020. So within the next year or two, we'll be able to see, have we been able to turn the dial on increasing those trips. And it was mentioned earlier too, the most recent, the governor's exec order 1919, regarding the work we need to do to continue to reduce vehicle miles traveled, and focusing our investments in support of housing near available jobs, and being able to manage congestion through strategies such as transit, walking, biking, and other active modes. The department also has brought in new leadership. So we have a new Caltrans director that'll be starting this month, actually. And he, prior to this, and I'm sure we'll continue, but his background is very much in active transportation, and he's been active at a national level within these groups. So how do we work together? So part of that, developing the interagency partnerships, developing a network of complete streets requires a collaboration between all of us stakeholders. And starting with that is district partnerships. And I use district here, a little bit of wordplay, but both the transit district and our Caltrans district working together. And it could be small steps. It could be small things where, such as your bus drivers could alert us to whether there's poorly timed signals, right? So we could look to see where are those efforts within the state highway system or along our corridors. Where can we do better on that? Maybe there's work going on at some of the transit stops that they've noticed that we do need improvements for ADA. So letting us know where those are. So that's, those are small things we could do. Piggybacking on other projects. We have a lot of work happening out there. There's a lot of maintenance and rehab work that's going on. So tagging onto those projects can work. Again, whether that's extending sidewalks, curb ramps, introducing bus shelters in those areas that we're looking at. Even looking at things that were mentioned before, providing transit priority in our signals. If we're already there working in a corridor, let's talk about that. There's major project involvement. Again, an example of that is the early involvement that was happening on North Coast Corridor and working to develop those transit improvements, such as the double tracking of the corridor there. We can work together too if we for whether it's bus rapid transit, transit priorities, things like that, that may be able to stand alone. We can work together on those projects. The local development review. Any of those developments adjacent to or could potentially have impact to the state highway system, we're reviewing those locally. So with the new rules for reduced VMT, we're looking for those mitigation efforts. And I think this is also where we can partner to work together, whether that's to look at transit station enhancement, active transportation linkages, transit incentives. Those are all things that we can include those recommendations within our responses to, in conjunction then with the transit district. Another good resource that we have is through our statewide, our Caltrans Division of Rail and Mass Transit. They offer they've put together a transit wiki. So the nickname is essentially a Wikipedia of all things transit there. But it's a good place to share transit information and best practices. So it's, you know, it's very community-based. It's interactive. There's work within the Division of Rail and Mass Transit that if there's things that as a transit agency you'd like to work on or think about, or is there innovative strategies out there, you know, partner with us to do research for those types of those items. And then, you know, it's also a platform engaging in what are some of the efforts, connectivity first, last mile type efforts on there. Let's see. So I thought I'd throw in also some photos about recent work. This is going to be, the photos are North Coast Corridor or heavy, because that is obviously a major project we have going on collectively in the region. So this shows the completed segment within Encinitas of the Coastal Rail Trail. In the background there, the double track element of this project here. So this is another segment of the North Coast Bike Trail under construction. This is along Manchester Avenue. This is on the eastbound or east side of I-5 along Manchester, as I mentioned. I'm going through, so rendering of what it will look like shortly. Looking the other side of Manchester, on the west side of I-5, again, the ultimate goal of having this bike ped connections through here. I know currently I don't believe you have transit stops along Manchester within this area, but it does show the connectivities to the different place types along the corridor here. What's next? Staying within Manchester, part of our goals is to provide system connections. And as we're talking about complete streets, just using this graphic, you can see along Manchester Avenue there, the red or deep orange along Manchester. So traditionally, I-5 has been a barrier to east-west connections. So the North Coast Corridor is allowing and enhancing that connection there for bikes and peds across that corridor through there. It does also provide opportunities. That orange blob on the right side of the graphic, that's currently where our construction offices are. And ultimately that will be park and ride location. It could ultimately be a transit stop. It will be a link to the lagoons and the trails there. It may also be a mobility hub, as Sandag is looking through and identifying those courses or those places in their RTP development. So there's a lot of potential within this area here. Caltrans, the park and ride there, yeah. That was purchased under for the development of North Coast Corridor. That's correct. There are still strawberry farms in place adjacent. This is a little further south. This is within the city of San Diego, but this series of photos, this is within the next phase of I-5 work. The plan will be to enhance the Sorrento Valley, the old Sorrento Valley Road bike trail Currently, you can see on the left there, it used to be a working city road. It's now really just used for maintenance by the city of San Diego. The ultimate goal will be then to connect Carmel Valley Road, the beach areas, then up and through 56, and making that linkage from along the 56 corridor bike ped trails, and then ultimately onto and along Sereno Valley Road and to the Coaster train station. So again, just showing that us working towards a completed system of these networks there. So Sereno Valley, bringing it up to the Coaster station. Now from Coaster, then looking or continuing south up the hill towards Genesee. So this is a before and after of the Genesee bike lane. Essentially, that segment, if you so chose to go from the down in Sereno Valley, adjacent to the Coaster station south, you would use the shoulder of I-5. There was few brave souls who did that. And what I want to express with this slide, and I know you can't read the numbers on the lower chart, but once this improvement was put in place, and once we made this connection up to the the science centers up there off of Genesee and the college, the hospital through there. So for just in the highlighted section, there's a few hours, the peak morning, I would call it. We had maybe a total of 10 riders, and I really think that was a good day that we measured that. But 10 riders that would use it over the course of several hours there in that morning peak. We're now seeing since the opening, we're averaging 60, 70, 80 riders that are using this section. So you build it, they will come. Yes. Then I wanted to go back up a little bit further north. This is on Encinitas Boulevard. So this work is currently, it's a construction photo, currently under construction here. Many of our east-west roadway connections or work that's happening along the city streets there we're pushing back the abutment walls there under the bridge, so creating space for safer, more comfortable connections for the bike ped users of the facility. And so why I bring this one up, and then I'll move to the next slide. I was provided the recent paper or report that was put together for NCTD's Complete Street program, and within there, so just with that center photo is that Encinitas Boulevard improvement, and on the left and the right were projects identified within the Complete Streets report that needed some work. And so, for example, again, the photos, the work is happening on Encinitas Boulevard. The photo then on the left is a transit stop just west of that area of work, right? And it's just outside our right-of-way, but it could, this is an opportunity that we should look at to see if we can incorporate this into the ongoing construction. So it's something that I've sent over to our project team just to take a look at. And the improvement here requested, or the ask was for bus shelters here. So again, opportunity that we could kind of start, knocking some of these out. The photo on the right is again in future phases of the work on I-5. This is at Carlsbad Village Drive. Same thing. Looking to, I don't know if this one was curb ramps or it could have also been bus shelters, but again, looking at or for those opportunities. And I think it goes a long way now that we've been provided the information as Caltrans. We can, it's part of our job to look to see, what others are doing in the region and see where we can incorporate these improvements. Oops. I know this has been talked about a little bit earlier, the upcoming grant cycles. So in addition to some of the other funding sources that have been mentioned, we have the next cycle for the active transportation program, and we're anticipating that call will be this spring or spring of 2020. And it's expected to include about $440 million in funding that can be applied for. As others previous had mentioned, NCTD has been successful in attaining Caltrans planning grants. There are a couple ongoing right now. The SM tip, the SNTIP, and then there's another one. I believe that tries to identify or working on the disconnect between transit and land use. And both of those are for $300,000-$400,000. So good efforts towards those planning grants. What's next? That's it. That's it. So any other questions you have for me?
Board Member Edson.
Thank you for the presentation, Ann. Not sure you can hear me. Going back to the old Sorrento Valley Road bike trail improvements that you talked about.
Yeah.
You said the ultimate goal was to connect Carmel Valley Road under I-556, so it connects basically from the beach inland, correct?
Right.
And the other way too.
Right.
Obviously. Do you have a timeline for that?
So not directly. We're looking for that in the next phase of the I-5, so that could be within, potentially within the next 3 years. However, we try to take advantage of funding opportunities as they come. For example, the connection as we get up and we try to capture the east-west usage. So along the 56, there's a gap getting across I-5 connecting to this area. So that project, we've been chasing active transportation grant dollars. For that, we're also looking to capture some of the City of San Diego's dollars for that have been set aside for the improvements to State Route 56, or in addition to include the work here. But this is probably and I could get some more information, but I think this is more of a near term. So looking, 3 to 5 years potentially. It could be sooner, but
I would appreciate it if you would keep me in the loop on that one. I have a couple of constituents that are really interested in it, and
yeah, we could definitely provide that information.
And
I know
my
they.
Bike Solana group, as well as some people who live in Del Mar have talked to me.
Okay.
My understanding is they get stuck behind Ruth's Chris and can't get across. They have to go back out on El Camino, right?
Right. That's the 56 connection that, we're working to get.
On this presentation, maybe we can have Katie finish up. We're going to try and focus more on the bus stop aspects than the biking aspects. So will you be available to answer questions at the end of the full presentation?
I will.
Excellent.
I just have one question real quick. The grant cycle, ATP grant cycle.
Yes.
Was that 400 million or whatever the number was? Was that for the whole state?
That is that's a statewide number.
All right.
All right. Okay, so I just have a handful of slides about the document that we're presenting today, which is a compilation of resources that NCTD has developed regarding bus stop design, station access, and accessible paths of travel. So NCTD is proposing, as Matt said, a collaboration between NCTD and the cities and county to ensure that bus stops and paths of travel are safe, accessible, and attractive for both riders and residents throughout North County. And I'm just going to read through a quick example of a previous collaboration between NCTD and the city of Oceanside that demonstrates how effective these partnerships can be. So the city of Oceanside requested improvements at a bus stop at Oceanside Boulevard and Peacock. The original request came in from the city on July 27th. NCTD reviewed the site and determined the sidewalk was not deep enough to allow the installation of a bench as is, and the stop improvement would require the addition of a retaining wall because of the existing slope at the stop. NCTD then communicated this information to the city a month later on August 26th and requested that the city make the sidewalk improvements and NCTD would install the shelter and bench. The city then completed the work on September 17th, and the shelter and bench were installed by NCTD on October 11th. So in total, that was about 11 weeks or 3 months. If NCTD were to perform this work, design plans would be required, which would take approximately 150 days to complete through the procurement process with an on-call engineering firm. And then NCTD would have to bid those design plans for construction, which would take approximately 120 days for procurement and construction. So with the city performing this work, we were able to shave off an estimated 210 days or 7 months off the work, assuming there aren't any real property issues. So that's kind of a key example of the benefit of the partnership between the cities and NCTD working together. So within the resources that we have today are a list of 100 NCTD bus stops and paths of travel proposed for improvement throughout the service area. We also have our 2018 Bus Stop Development Handbook that provides specific design standards for NCTD bus stops. And then our Sprinter Station Access Study, which we had a consultant conduct in 2018 to provide recommendations on pedestrian and cyclist access at 8 Sprinter stations. So to develop the list of 100 bus stops, and I'll provide 2 examples in the next 2 slides, NCTD reviewed ridership data between October 2017 and April 2018 to propose the improvements based on passenger activity distributed throughout the service area. On this slide, we have an example from the city of Carlsbad where there's a bus stop that has sidewalk access, but no ADA compliant bus stop pad. And this stop is located on a road with relatively high speeds at 50 miles per hour. The proposed improvement that the document lays out is to construct an ADA compliant bus stop pad with sufficient room for installation of a bench and shelter. On this next slide, we have an example where there is no sidewalk access or ADA compliant bus stop pad. So the recommendation is to construct an ADA compliant bus stop pad with sufficient room for NCTD to install a bench and shelter to improve access. And then here we have an example from our field work for the Sprinter Station Access Study. And so we looked at the connecting walking and biking paths surrounding Melrose Drive Station. And you'll just see a few examples of dirt paths and difficult to access sidewalks surrounding the station. And the next steps we have proposed are transmitting the proposed recommendations, so that 100 bus stop list, to city managers throughout North County for their consideration and inclusion to identify funding. And then we will also schedule meetings with public works departments and the city managers to review the information included in the staff report and collaborate on any other opportunities to improve access. And with that, we have the staff recommendation to receive the presentation and staff report and request that North County cities identify funding to support access improvements to the recommended list of bus stops and Sprinter stations.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a public speaker on this item, so we will hear from Ms. Joan Brown now.
where do I begin? I take the bus a lot, and I think the scariest of all bus stops is the one on Cedar and Vista Way. And we have Scripps Coastal there. And there is no pad. There are no pads, I mean. And the east bus stop is really in the street. It goes off in a little curve, but when you're standing there, when you get off the bus, I can put my white cane out there and it'll just be broken off. The cars are going 50, 60 miles. And I don't do that one anymore. And then on the other side, there's no pad. There isn't any pad. You have to, and there's no sidewalk on either side of that. On Cedar, you have to cross the street with no crosswalk, and then you have to walk on cinders or through the parking lot, and then there's a retaining wall to get to the bus stop to go west on the 302. So that is a very bad one. And there are several sidewalks on Oceanside Boulevard in front of strip malls that come to an end, and there's a plant right in front of you. So the accessibility ramp is to your left onto Oceanside Boulevard on the right-hand turn. So these cars are coming down. If you aren't aware of right-hand turners, it takes you right down into the path of the right-hand turner. And most of the strip malls do not have entrance for pedestrians. And the bus will leave you off in the middle of the block, and there's no way to get into the strip mall. You don't know if you have to go right or left. And to speak of Encinitas, I just came from a funeral at Moonlight Beach, and I had to walk up Encinitas Boulevard to go into the transit center there to catch the 101 or the 309. And I found it very, very hard. I didn't realize I couldn't get on those buses. At the first block, I had to walk down another block. And it doesn't say this is where you get the buses at all. At least I could not find it. Of course, I can't see, but I just think that there are so many things. And I think there should be a bench. There's no stop in front of the police station in Oceanside. And sometimes if you miss that bus, you have another half an hour before another bus comes. Or if you want the, anyway, I could go on forever, but I think that finishing sidewalks to bus stops is the most important thing, because walking on the street, oh, I wanted to go to the strip malls by
Mrs. Brown?
my 2 minutes. Okay.
That's the three yes, and I do appreciate you bringing these examples. The description of Vista Way and Cedar, we do have that in the report.
Oh,
And it
that's
has a
okay.
photograph, and it is a bus stop that definitely needs attention. So thank you for that.
And it should have a light,
Yes, ma'am.
traffic light.
All right, with that, I'm going to go to Board Member Jenkins first here.
Matt and I have already had this discussion, but I think this item caused some angst for our city managers. And so I'm just wondering if maybe they should have been informed sooner than they were informed about this item, because, well, that's my comment.
Okay. Over the course of the 11 years I've been here, we've talked quite a bit with different cities about bus stop projects, street projects. In fact, as the last speaker came up, that specific area when John Aguilera was on our board, we all went out on a field trip ourselves and were shocked and horrified at what we saw out there in terms of the conditions that people have to actually endure. So nothing that's in this package is new to any city. I think if anything, the fact that we've now pulled all of this information together should be more of a focus point for our cities to work more collaboratively with the district to implement improvements. Let's just be candid. The cities, you control the right of way, those specific right of way, you approve the specific projects, and then we are left with kind of whatever decisions that are being made. Within our budget capacity, we don't have funding to make improvements at all of the locations throughout North County to support the types of infrastructure improvements that need to be put in place. And as Katie highlighted in her example of Oceanside, it is significantly faster and less expensive for the cities to advance it. And one of the basic reasons for that is because much of what we do has federal requirements, has federal dollars in it, and comes with federal requirements. And we only have a tiny bit of money that we could ever devote to it, because if you think about our capital budget, where's the money going to go? Money's going to go to replacement buses, replacement trains, and bridge projects and facility projects. So I was actually appreciative of the city manager's feedback. I wish they would be that proactive. All of the time when it comes to this issue, we intend to sit down with the city managers collectively, individually, and with their public works directors. Katie and I, for sure, will help cities in terms of putting together grant applications, identifying potential scenarios for funding. But, you know, one of the examples I gave to Katie as we were talking about, we don't get a piece of the local street and roads money where we could make an investment, a decision based upon dollars that have been specifically directed into it. So part of this discussion is for the board members, and when you go back to your cities, to just push your city managers to be a little bit more cognizant and focused on this, where they can do something. Guess what? They now have a list that identifies the priorities for them. So it's not like we're doing a budget exercise on anyone today. This is really a call to order for everyone. Let's focus in on that. I would welcome anyone who wants to go on a site tour and see those bus stops that were just spoken about on Vista Way. It would absolutely break your heart when you think about the fact that there are people who absolutely have no choice but to go out there and stand out there in conditions that just should not make any of us proud, and it should alarm us that people have to do it. So that's kind of my stick on that. I'm just refusing to say I apologize on it. I want us to focus in on getting this together. We will, as always, work super duper collaboratively with the cities and city managers and public works directors on this.
Vice Chair Feller.
Thank you. That was part of the discussion that I had with our brand new 3-day-old city manager on the way here. There's a couple of things. The bike trails, the first part of the presentation, there's a big difference between for work and for recreation on how you measure these things. And you know, I think throwing all the craziness on distracted drivers is they're just as distracted walking as they are and riding a bike as they are driving a car, fooling with their phones and what have you. So I don't want to see drivers blamed for everything. And besides, bikes they don't pay anything towards these needs like cars pay with their gas tax. So when you bring this forward to our staffs, are we going to be required to do these?
If I had that authority, you would be. But no. This is essentially us doing. So the history of this, just for it's something I tried to figure out here, because in most of the working environments that I have been in the transit industry, local government, cities, county, they've done the bus stop improvements that were associated with supporting our transit operations. And I come here and I look, sporadically when we have dollars that we were doing these capital projects. and looking at the complexity of us having to do these kinds of projects, not having a dedicated workforce. So we've been working as part of our overall 5-year program to significantly improve the system. This is just simply pulling together this information and identifying for the cities, hey, here's our top 100 priorities. Let's work on this. So we're not in a position to require, but we do want to get more support and more focus in on this issue and create a report each year looking at where are we at with this progress in terms of making progress with this. We should all look at this as an opportunity to identify that since we've identified these projects, we can work together on putting grant applications together that the cities can implement these types of projects much quicker, much more efficient than NCTD.
Thank you. So the improvements to the property are on the backs of the cities, and you'll put up the bus.
Well, I won't use the worded. It's your right of way.
Well, and that's another issue. I mean, some of these bus stops that we saw, we may have to obtain right away.
Right. And again, this is a list that we want to work through, look for grant opportunities to strategically implement to the degree your capital program has capacity to accommodate it. We would like for you to try to advance it.
And also removal of vacated stops. I will tell you, I believe Scripps is moving to the big building at Jefferson and Vista Way ultimately. So it may not be heavy use down there later. So I'll forward all this information to our staff.
Board Member Edson.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Matt, for your comments. I understand it's informational, but I do think it warrants some discussion. And I have, I think, like many others, had some discussion with my own city manager. I called him, he called me. Basically, at the end of the staff report, it states that there's no fiscal impact. And while this may be true for NCTD, it's a bit misleading since there would be significant fiscal impact to the cities and county if implemented. In the executive summary, page 3 of attachment 10A, NCTD requests that the cities and county fund the construction of bus stops and path travel improvements within the respective right-of-ways. And on page 5 of attachment 10A, the second sentence of the first paragraph states that NCTD is requiring the cities to construct ADA compliant bus stop pads with sufficient space for amenities such as benches and shelters. I certainly support improvements, especially in the case of ADA compliance. However, this requirement conflicts with the terms of a 2004 MOU between NCTD and my city. Item 3 on page 2 of the MOU states that in all circumstances, ADA compliance and all mandated federal and state compliance remains the responsibility of NCTD, and issues of feasibility remain with NCTD. Attachment 10A lists 11 bus stop locations in Solana Beach where NCTD recommends, doesn't demand, but recommends that the city provide improvements. Page 7 and 8 of the aforementioned MOU lists most, if not all, of the bus stop locations in the city of Solana Beach. At 3 of those locations, the MOU specifically states that NCTD is to install ADA pad and bench, but that hasn't occurred. So with regard to the complete streets, I support the concept of complete streets. However, I believe that NCTD bus stops are NCTD's facilities. I absolutely support partnering collaboratively to improve walkability to and around NCTD's bus stops. I want nothing more than my people to arrive safe and sound, whether they're going to school or going to work. But I do not support NCTD transferring the burden entirely to the cities and county. I recommend and would support NCTD applying for a single comprehensive grant to make the improvements to that the district deems necessary throughout North County. And the email that you shared with us from Mr. Epp, the city manager from Escondido, talked about the minimum ATP grant allowed by the state is $250,000, likely greater than any individual city's cost of improvements. So, just my thoughts.
Okay, and I do, in fact, I guess on this issue, I want to dig in a little bit rather than kind of passive answers. So when we talk about complete streets and mobility, you know, and I'm going to use the chair's city as an example because I know he can deal with me using his city as the example. So you think about like La Costa to Leucadia, and you walk out there and you got bus stops essentially in the dirt, right? And I hear feedback from people talking about, why don't you guys have, you know, improvements at this location? Now, is the expectation that we build X number of miles of sidewalk? Or if we were to build just a pad and put a shelter, but there's dirt all around the facilities, there's no ADA compliance. Does that make sense? And so so the examples that you give talk about a very centrally, like one focused area where that bus stop is. But it doesn't even make sense to make the improvement if someone who's in a wheelchair or who needs an ADA compliant facility can't actually get there. And so to me, as we have this discussion, it is a broader discussion about the cities in terms of what is your level of commitment? And I'm not singling out any one city, I'm singling you all out. What is your level of commitment towards looking at those highest traveled areas and making sure there's a complete street path? And one of the things I do want to move everyone off of an NCTD bus stop. So over the course of 11 years that I've been here, one of my major focus areas to make sure that we try to work within a framework as an agency that essentially is owned by the cities. Okay, so we can't separate the transit agency from North County, from the cities. We're part of you. And so to some degree, our ability to be successful is based upon the table that you set. And it's critical to me that we shape this conversation towards how do we get to a much more developed process for ensuring complete streets are in place to support our buses being able to move quicker. I'm going to talk a little bit on the executive director's comments about a study that we want to look at high priority routes in terms of travel time for buses. Well, it also points to some of the development activities that the cities have undertaken that will definitely impact our ability to move people on buses. So for me on this issue, I'm totally supportive of the notion that we need to work collaboratively with the cities, but I would say that the cities have not done nearly as much as is needed to support this whole notion of making it easier to be able to gain access to facilities.
Amen, brother.
Yes, so when I saw this item on the agenda, it reminded me of something that elected officials don't like to talk about very much, which is our biggest failure. And that stretch of Leucadia that shows the highway with the bus stops that have plastic chairs that people bring out, or, you know, they sit on tires, or there's any number of things. Several of those stops have been on the website that is the worst bus stops in the world, or something like that. So I have, since I started, tried to move the needle when it comes to bus stops. It's interesting to see these stops identified, these Encinitas stops. And the reality is that most of those pictures include, those bus stops have benches. We have way too many bus stops that don't even have benches. So people like Mrs. Brown, who are transit dependent and have to go to the grocery store and buy their groceries, they have to come out with their bags of groceries and stand at a bus stop that they don't even have the opportunity to sit at. So what I saw from this report was an opportunity for each of us, each jurisdiction, to have what NCTD feels is the top priorities. And I think that it is intended to start a conversation. And maybe we could have handled it a little differently in terms of having that conversation first preliminarily before we had it here. But in the end, it is intended to improve the situation for our riders. And so for me, I think that that's the most important part of having this on the agenda. And I know that Mr. Tucker will be working with each of our city managers to see how we might be able to make the improvements that have been identified in here. So any other comments or questions? Mayor McNamara.
I was going to say something, Tony, but I think you summarized it. I think it could have been handled a little better. I think we all count on you for leadership in terms of where our problems are. I don't think we had the communications perhaps that we should have had, but that's okay. We'll just, it's not the end of the world. We identified something. We're going to start talking about it and figure out ways to get it to fix the problem, right?
Right.
That's all it is. So, well said, Tony.
So,
Board Member Drucker.
yeah, I would just like to echo a little bit of what Joel talked about is if there's a way, that we could create a consortium to get the grants, that would be nice. I mean, obviously Del Mar with only 4 bus stops isn't going to get any grant money.
That's all of them, isn't it?
Yep, just about. So it would be nice if we could work together with other cities or the NCTD to work on getting our bus stops approved. And we also know that we have some other amenities that we would like to offer. And if we could work with NCTD and or other cities to get these grants, that would be wonderful.
Board Member Edson.
Thank you. I just had one more comment. I really appreciated having Caltrans come out too and talk about complete streets today. And I appreciate having worked with them for my city to add sidewalk, add safer walking paths and safe routes to school for kids, because part of that is getting that infrastructure built and those sidewalks built so we can move people from point A to point B.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 11, Damon Blythe, the Chief Operations Officer, is going to introduce a presentation by MV Transportation.
Good afternoon. I'd like to introduce Senior Vice President Jim Schultzman, our new General Manager Ray Robinson, and our Deputy General Manager for Breeze Operations, Kurt Burlingham. They'll be giving you a presentation on MV's FY19 performance.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Schultzman, as he introduced me. I'm going to make this brief as we go through, but the highlight.
Thank you so much. To highlight MV, we collectively as a company serve 110 million passengers. We drive over 3 million miles a year and we have 20,000 team members. We maintain 11,000 vehicles and we continually focus on providing relationships as best-in-class partnerships. So the contract with NCTD began in July of 2017, and I'm not sure if you remember or not, but I was here last year speaking about highlights from the year one and kind of the focus that we would have this year. Our partnership has been solidified through working in the past 2 years with our operations on Breeze, Lyft, and Flex operations within North County. We currently employ within the area 560 team members and operate 300 vehicles within your fleet. Some of the areas that we focused on that we talked about last year that we were going to be focusing on this year that was a large focus for us are highlighted in this slide. The areas are specific because of the fact of the targets that we had gotten within the contractual guidelines within our contract with NCTD. Overall, I believe we had a very productive year focused on many facets within the business. We achieved our contractual guidelines in all KPIs. Although achievement is important, we also believe that exceeding the KPIs is even more important. We implemented increased customer service within our MV's Platinum Customer Service Program. We had multiple conversations with NCTD's staff surrounding the zero delay vision with action plans surrounding this initiative. And we deployed increased technology for our staff to increase accuracy and productivity. This slide is somewhat busy, so I'm gonna kind of highlight it, and there's multiple slides throughout it that highlight these individuals. So I'm gonna kind of spend about a minute on this slide. We'll focus a little bit on a Breeze, and then more importantly, through this presentation, it's all about what are we doing next year to continue improvement and continue forward momentum. So Out of all of this, we'll be taking the Breeze Lift and Flex. Breeze represents about 90% of our total service, which is our fixed route service, as I'm sure you're all well aware. I'll pass it to Kurt to speak about the Breeze KPIs as we move forward. Yeah.
All right, good afternoon, members of the board. Let me get up close first. Good afternoon, members of the board. I'm going to start off with on-time performance, which is really one of the hallmarks of performance as it deals with operations, as it provides a true gauge of the efficiency of our operation. As we can see over the past many months of this year, we have met that performance goal. And even though we have met it, we continue to look at opportunities to improve on that, because that's really the service on the street that people rely on. The percentage of service provided, the goal for this is 99.8. And while we are falling just shy of that, we're continuing to look at opportunities to improve on this as well. This is truly in concert with the NCTD's focus and their initiative on the Zero Delay program. Distance between failures, this would be a hallmark indicator on our maintenance program. And we have even though we have met that goal over several months during this year, this is an intense focus of our maintenance staff to continue identifying opportunities to meet that standard. Now with safety is really the #1 priority at MV. And our goal, of course, is to have 0 preventable accidents. So this slide does show that we are trending in the right direction as far as year-to-year basis goes. We've decreased the number of accidents per month over that year. We've also met that standard in the contract, which is 1 preventable accident per 100,000 passengers carried. So again, it's an intense focus that we'll have on improving our safety as we go along. And then customer service, continued training and reinforcement are the keys to success here. Over the last several months, we can see that there's been an indication of how that success or that focus has paid dividends in decreasing the number of customer complaints that we get.
Now I'm going to move on to our paratransit service, and this was the primary focus for this year. And I sat with Matt Tucker last year, and he had told me that we had to raise the bar on our paratransit service, not only the blend between on-time performance, but the productivity, 2 very large indicators within our paratransit service. So a couple of these slides, as you can see, if you look at the on-time performance from last year to this year, you can see the dramatic increase from the October timeframe into all the way through the June, with a continual hold to that on-time performance. With the same thing, you'll then look at how we leverage the productivity with the same, and the productivity is essentially a shared ride service. No different than the Uber and Lyft and TNCs. We had the productivity, and you can see in the December timeframe dipping into the 1.6 area, where our averages are in the 1.8 area, which is a large indicator for us as coupled with our on-time performance. And this is another slide that essentially depicts the same as what I just did. It's just more of a linear graph. But what I want to focus on here is not only the lift and flex distance that I just showed you in the Breeze section. You can see that this fleet is doing very well. The actual performance is 25,000 miles between road calls. So as a fleet itself, as if you were to separate it, it's doing well between the miles between road calls. Again, as Kurt said, safety is our #1 priority. So it's extremely important for us to maintain. This graph is a little bit busy, but our goal is obviously 0 accidents. So any accident is the wrong accident. But seeing here with the standard across the industry, you can see that we're exceeding the goals. And this is the one that I'm particularly proud of, because this is a barometer of the service. So did we hit the key indicators by our on-time performance and our productivity based on how customers see us. And as you can see, our customer complaints have dramatically decreased in 2019, and we intend on keeping them even lower. So now I'm going to turn it to Ray as he tells you about how we're going to move towards year 3, our newest general manager to the project.
Yes, good afternoon, board. I'm 4 days into the project. Just got here from the state of Virginia. We operated the Fairfax Connector system, and this is a great community. And I'm glad to be here, and we're going to represent the transit service well. We're excited about our new direction, and we will continue to focus on providing high quality of service for our transit system. Our goal is to exceed the customer expectations with high quality service, and we will do it through improved maintenance, continuous training of our workforce, and operational enhancements. We have a great team of mechanics and staff who remain focused on our major component replacement program for our rolling stock of buses. Our full focus will be on customer experience, with our operators being true ambassadors for our transit service. Staff visibility at key transit stations is also very important component. We have to personally engage the riders. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to providing great service going into year 3, and we welcome any questions that you may have.
Mayor McNamara.
This is for Matt. So Virginia's the incubator for transportation managers. Is that what you're telling us?
It's the center for all great intellects. Well, and I would just say, you know, for you guys to kind of keep in mind with MV, we have approaching some significant milestones. So on our paratransit side, we are implementing what we call a 60-40 program. You guys kind of skirted past that real quick. This is where we're looking to make a conversion over that more than 40% of our ADA paratransit service will be a brokered service, i.e. that means we're going to be using taxi cabs and other vendors to be able to deliver that service. What our intent is to eliminate direct employees of MV performing the work over the weekends and during low ridership periods in the AM and PM. What that does, it further drives down the cost. It supports us achieving higher levels of productivity. As they showed in that chart, they've made steady progress in terms of moving the passengers carried per revenue hour up. And in fact, we are consistently hitting now 2 passengers per revenue hour. That is a significant improvement over the baseline of where we are. But we're looking to take additional steps forward with them. In addition to that, on the Lyft side, we're hoping by next year to be able to implement a couple of more pilots of on-demand service conversions. And we're looking to have NV step into that role as we make that transition as well. So we're on the cusp of making a lot of significant changes. I would say in terms of our relationship with MV, we also have a strong partner who's not here, is the union, who has absolutely been, I think, the strongest supporter of the zero delay program that we have within the district. So we have a strong foundation. There's some complicated things that we need to do, but I do feel like we're on the right track in terms of getting it done.
All right, seeing no other questions. Thank you, gentlemen, all very much for your presentation. Keep up the good work. Thanks. All right, moving on to item number 12. Eric Rowe is going to introduce a presentation by Bombardier Transportation.
I'd like to introduce, sure, turn it on. Been here enough. Introduce Neil Jeans, the general manager for Bombardier Transportation, and Gina Trobley for Bombardier as well. Give a presentation on the performance from for FY19.
Good afternoon. So I'm Neil Jeans, recently appointed as the GM for this project for the O&M for Coaster and Sprinter and all of the track and signal and such like. and Gina Tremblay is the Vice President for Services for the AME region, who's also recently started the job. Yeah. So,
Can you pull the mic a little closer?
Sorry.
So,
yeah, there's no.
Yes, he is.
There's been a few guesses, but never Texas. So I'll go through the slides. We've got an overview of the contract for those that that aren't fully aware of the scope of it. We're going to look at some of the key performance indicators that we track and the agency track us against, which are the contractual targets. Look at what we've been working on in terms of enhancing the service. Give you an update on the capital program in terms of, it's mainly around the Sprinter, but we have started the Coaster as well. And then also look at what things we're focusing on for 2020. Okay, so in terms of the contract, there's two separate contracts. We've got the O&M base contract, but then we've also got the capital works program as well, which was done under a separate contract. Now that is for a lot of the work that was done that needed to be done on the Sprinter in terms of things such as power packs, axles, gearboxes, all those kind of things that hadn't previously been done. So that's all being dealt with separately, but I've got a slide on that. So contract term, it was a 7-year base with a 3-year option. We started in June 16, which this current 7-year goes to 2023. In addition to the base contract, the executed options that we've been given as in addition to the contract equates to about $19.3 million to date. So in terms of the maintenance of equipment, we've got the coaster fleet, which consists of the 7 locomotives and 10 cab cars and 18 coaches. The locomotives all due to be replaced starting from August 2020. And then as far as the Sprinter goes, we've got 12 2-car DMU consists. Also included in the base is the maintenance of way. So we've got 61.5 miles of coaster track and 22 miles of the Sprinter route. We've got all the grade crossings, switches, comm stations and the dispatch room. And then capital work that goes along with that part of the project is the wheel truing, which we do at Escondido. We've got tyre replacements, rail grinding and bridge repairs. So in terms of the operation, we're gone too far. We're running 133 trains a week on the coaster side with 8 station stops, and on Sprinter 456 with the 15 station stops. In terms of the KPIs, the on-time performance target we've achieved on both fleets, and on-time performance is based on getting to the end or the end point, one direction within 5 minutes and 59 seconds. Anything at 6 minutes or greater is counted as a late train. So the target within the contract is 95%, and we've achieved that on both fleets. Customer complaints, we didn't achieve what we needed to achieve on Coaster for this particular fiscal year, considerably higher than what we target and what's in the contract. The thing with Coaster we find is though it's one failure on Coaster causes huge disruption, and that's a big thing that the customers clearly aren't going to be happy with. None of us would be, but with Sprinter, when there's a failure, because there's more trains out on that route, it's easier to work around it. Coaster, it generally stops the whole show. Hence, we get a lot of complaints then. But that is the biggest category for complaints. It's the mechanical failures. And the MDBFs are the main distance between failure, slightly under it on Coaster, but Sprinter we're comfortably achieving what we targeted. In terms of the signal side of the business, again, and the track, they're both for the same reasons really. We're exceeding the targeted objective. We have done a number of different actions over the last few weeks where we've changed the way that that we're scheduling the teams, because I mean, especially on Coaster for signal, typically the guys are never going to be in the same area where the crossing gate or the bells fail, wherever it is. So typically it's the response time. Sods always happens in rush hour, so the traffic for them to attend there is a lot greater as well. What we have done now, that we've got them rostered on a 24/7 period, so we've always got people available on duty rather than on call. And we're also trying to spread them along the route, so they're not all at the MOW building out on Oceanside Boulevard, but they're on the route, so they can be in attendance much faster. And that's the same for signal and track. And then the communication side of thing and the dispatching side, we're well within our target. So just some stats out of things that have been achieved in the fiscal year 19. The 77 miles of track resurfaced. There's over 5,000 tyres replaced. We've got rail grinding of 9,500 linear feet, and also rail grinding. We've started to look at what additional improvements we could be doing on the signalling the equipment side. I mean, if we compare it to the Sprinter, the infrastructure, the signals, the crossings, everything was put into service at the same time. So of course everything starts to fail at the same time as well then. So although we're not seeing the level of failures on the signalling side of the Sprinter operation that we saw on the Sprinter vehicles, we want to try and be proactive and try and predict. I mean, some of the equipment we are seeing failing now, some of it is obsolete. So we've got to look at what's the next generation piece of equipment we can be replacing that with, and do it prior to it failing, or prior to it becoming an epidemic. The scheduling I've mentioned, that's given us much greater coverage and response times. Now the response times was significantly hurting us. I mean, we've seen some massive reductions just in the last 2 weeks since this one schedule on the signalling side has been implemented. In terms of, well, again, it's linked back to response times. We've got a certain activities. We have to have a site warden if people are working on the track. So that's obviously more than one person that's got to attend. It's normally 3. So to try and get round that site warden but still keep our workers safe, we're looking at the track safe system, which we've implemented at a few areas across the Americas. It's very similar to Yard Safe that we've got in Stuart Mesa and in SOF at Escondido, but this is basically it's a geo fence, and the guys wear these handheld devices, and it's to keep them within a safe zone. So we can set up dedicated zones on the network where, you know, we can say go to zone 2, and their machine is programmed to zone 2, and they won't be allowed to stray out of that work zone to keep them safe. Now, this is just phase 1 of a 2-stage approach, because obviously that's great, you keep them in the area, but the trains can still get in. So we've got to look at now the GPS signal from trains, which we've looked at. That would work fine, but of course we've got more than just NCTD vehicles in this corridor, so we'd have to get the buy-in of all the other operators that use this. The easier way is that we have fixed transponders on the track on the boundaries of each of these zones, and that's going to be phase 2 of it. So the guys will get a warning when a train passes that transponder or something, so they can clear the route. But it's just a way of protecting our staff and reducing or making us more efficient, really, and reducing response times for more than one person. In terms of the operations and maintenance side of things, we've rolling out a number of best practices that we'd implemented previously on Sprinter. We're trying to get a standard approach across all of the buildings. It's proving harder than you would think when you've already done it once, but we've got it at Sprinter. It's up and running. It's working really well. Coaster, we've had a lot of new employees, so they're just starting to pick it up now. But it's basically visualising everything we do. So we visualise what's the state of the fleet out in service now, what's the workload that's coming in for this shift, the next week, and we can make sure we plan it. So we're always optimising the availability of the fleet. Because just to put it into perspective, the Sprinter fleet at the moment, because of all the overhaul work going on, the overhauls that didn't happen as per the OEM recommendations, we've only got a fleet of 12, and 3 of those are out of service for quite a long time at the moment, waiting for, well, a number of reasons. Mostly it's gearboxes at the moment, because they're starting to fail, but they're 13 years old now, so they're going to. And safety as well, we go through that at every shift handover, so it's getting the guys engaged in that safety culture. And actually on the 24th of this month, it will be our anniversary of 0 accidents or incidents. Another opportunity that we're looking at, one of the biggest availability issues for the Sprinter, or lack of availability issues for Sprinter, has always been the wheels. I mean, most people know what happened back in 2013 when we had to replace all of the wheels. This particular route, in my opinion, from other projects I've worked on, I mean, you could like it to a roller coaster. In effect, there's some really tight curves. It's going up and over the 15, 78 twice. Yeah, but there's very tight curves, and we do see a lot of flange wear because of that. The problem with flange wear is to get the profile of the flange back, you have to take a lot of material off the tread. Hence, you don't get the most efficient life out of the wheel. So what we're looking at now, there's a guy we've brought in who's joining our team here now that's come over from Australia. They experienced very similar things, and with the support of the agency, we're going to invest in this caliper predictive wheel where, well, it's a measuring gauge basically, but we can collect data, we can link it in with Maximo, and basically that will enable us to look at, are we using the right profile for the infrastructure that we're running on? And hopefully we can start doing some proactive wheel turning rather than waiting until the wheel's condemnable and it's got to be removed and reprofiled. Oh yeah, and the other big win for this is we used to have to work with a tolerance of 1 mil wheel to wheel on the same axle. This is the wheel diameter, because obviously if you've got a different size wheels, yeah, 1 mil is very, very hard to maintain. We've gone back to the OEM. They've agreed, well, they actually agreed 2.5 mil we could go to. We're going to go with 2 mil because we think we can take about 30% of our wheel turning activity out. And we're just waiting for the CPUC now to approve it. We met with them. They like the concept. They're happy that the OEM has signed off on it. So we're just waiting for their agreement now, and that's what we'll move to. Failure review board, we're looking at implementing this now. Basically it's getting down to root cause. So we see the same type of faults quite frequently in some areas, but this is enabling us to, by tracking and recording every single fault and doing a root cause analysis on it, we're able to see what is the true root cause. And it may be that rather than wait until it occurs on the next train, we can go and do a fleet check to look at, you know, is the root cause we've identified on the failed train, is that evident on the next failure, and prevent it from happening in that way. And then based on the findings from those failure review board meetings, we can then put a growth plan together to improve the reliability. So Sprinter capital work schedule started, well, bits of it started about 3 years ago, but it's progressively ramped up. This takes us through to 2022. I've got another slide shortly which will list all of the various systems that are being maintained. But again, we've visualized this on the board at Escondido, so the guys can see, you know, if they're doing a engine inspection and they find an oil leak, when's that one due its engine change? Has it already been done? Is it a warranty repair? And we can start to plan better. And we're aligning the capital work more with the planned maintenance now, so it obviously maintains the available, makes best availability possible. We've also started the overall program on the coaster cars now. The first one's in 20. I'm not going to guess the number now. 2401, I think. And that's due to come out at Christmas. Now we're targeting 4 cars a year. Although I did have discussions with Mike Coulter this morning, we are looking at how can we increase that. So 5 would be the optimum number, because it gives you a train set overhauled every year then. And then we're also working closely with our suppliers now. We've got some critical suppliers in terms of the capital work. I mean, we've got suppliers that are doing a number of different systems for us, so we've making sure that we stay close with them in terms of the planning. So I've listed out all of the capital task orders that have been awarded. I won't I won't go through them all. Do you want me to talk through each line? No, I didn't think so. No. But there are a few for the coaster there, but the majority, I think everything on Sprinter now is captured. And as I say, the coaster is just starting. So key areas for improvements. I wasn't here in 16 when the project started, but my view is that it was still run as two entities, Coaster and Sprinter. So what we're trying to do, or trying to get much stronger, is the business plan being aligned across the whole project. So it's the rail operations rather than Sprinter and Coaster. So we're putting a plan together. I'm working with the management team now. So they've all got their departmental plans, but they're all feeding into one objective, which is defined within the project business plan. Employee engagement. We've had a lot of staff turnover in this project over a number, well, three and a half years it's been going. So that has been a big, it's had a big impact on the employee engagement. So we're working very hard with that now to get the team to where they need to be. We've got support from the global team, which I'm actually part of, but we've got other people coming in with different skill sets. So we're bringing in a guy on Monday who's coming in to support the operational management side of it. So training, efficiency testing, scheduling, all that kind of stuff he's going to be working on. And then there's another guy starting a couple of weeks later that's going to take that to the next level. Everything we're doing really now is supporting the zero delay program of NCTD. I mean, we shouldn't really need to have a separate zero delay program. It should be in the DNA of everything we do, but everything that we are working on now is aimed at that ultimately. That's about it on there. Yeah, I've mentioned the materials, how we're working with the suppliers, the training schedule. We're working with Siemens now on putting a training schedule together with their support. We're also looking at additional staff with the support of Mr. Tucker. We're targeting to have a commissioning engineer, so we can have a locomotive engineer that is 100% available for coaster work. So he'll receive all the training from the Siemens instructors, and he'll be the person then that rolls it out to all of the Bombardier engineers as we introduce the fleet. Obsolescence, big issue on Sprinter. One of the task orders was for a brake overhaul. So all the brake valves are being replaced, and I can't remember the exact value of it now, but this guy we brought in from Australia, he's been looking at what could we do to bring the braking system up to the current day standard. It's turned out the OEM, Knorr, they can provide that upgrade, and it's going to be considerably cheaper than the brake valve like for like replacement that we were going to do. But it does eliminate that obsolescence issue then. But that's just one of many systems on the Sprinter where we do face this obsolescence. And then engineering support. There's a team been put together now on the East Coast where they're looking at what engineering support, because typically a similar operation, let's say DMU, they're going to see similar issues across all the projects. But the purpose of this team is to look at what issues is everybody seeing. Let's put them all together. What commonalities are there, and let's look at finding a solution for all of the issues. So that team will be spending some time out here, but they're based over in Montreal. And that concludes the slides. So any questions?
Vice Chair Feller.
Early in your slides, you had a list of, it was like miles. Pardon me? Yeah, that's it. And there was a couple of, and there was rail replacement and.
Yep. That one?
Yeah. And so is that tie replacement, rail replacement, is that feet or miles?
The rail replacement is linear feet.
Okay.
Ties is
individual ties. Okay. I looked at that and I thought, 77
9,000 miles of rail.
and,
Thank you for the presentation. One of the areas that I think we're working on is getting staffed up to contractual levels.
Yeah.
And so that I look forward to that. The other issue that I wanted to mention in terms of communication, we have some riders who experience failure of these trains and cancellations. And I think that they feel that there's a lack of communication about the issues surrounding and what the plans are for addressing that failure, whether there's a bus bridge that's going to be put in place or so that they can communicate to folks that may be waiting for them. So my hope is that we can continuously improve that particular part of our customer experience. And I think you may know that a very important customer is on board. He's left the meeting now, but Supervisor Desmond is a regular rider. And so, I think that that gives him an opportunity to experience some of this firsthand. So.
And so I do want to comment on a couple of things. For sure, when you looked at the performance metrics, the signal failures is extremely disappointing. And like most things, there's more than one reason in terms of that actual signal failure to explain what's going on. But I would say from an NCTD point of view on the coastal line, we did receive a grant for signal optimization. And within that grant, we have developed a specific scope of work for modernization and upgrades of the signal systems that are have reached the end of their useful life. The board chair and I had an opportunity to have a good conversation with the Bombardier CEO and other execs relative to a few matters that I think are contributing to Bombardier not optimizing. I used one of your words, not optimizing its performance at the district. And one of the key issues has been the ability to retain staff and to hire people in a timely manner. And so we have just reached an agreement that will support Bombardier implementing a more streamlined process for filling vacancies with specific timelines around that. I think that's going to be a key piece combined with the other significant changes that have already taken place in the contract to really help trend performance in the right direction. For us, we're really counting on Bombardier implementing a significant capital program on the coaster, implementing a significant capital program on the Sprinter, and executing the operations in a way that supports zero delay. And I'll keep saying it. I know Neil is tired of me saying it. No one has a car that I know of. I'm sure there's someone who does, who has a car that breaks down once a month. Okay. And so our standards, and so when I talk to people, there is I call them minimum contract performance requirements, because our standard has to be 100%. And we have moved all of our contractors and most of the employees towards understanding that as a requirement. And I think with Neil being on board, because he's been with us for a very short period, even though he had a prior stint with us, there's a clear understanding and path forward. Maintenance of equipment, we were cratering a few months ago. We've stabilized maintenance of equipment, and maintenance of equipment, I think, is actually leading the way for the organization. And some of the easier areas to fix, like transportation and operations and dispatch, are areas where we got to really grind a little bit and raise the bar of performance for the execution, exactly along the lines of what you said. When something happens, we have the most procedures in the world for what's supposed to happen. And we just have to now stand our ground on people fully executing those procedures to make sure, should we have an unfortunate event of delay, that we minimize that delay. So we got a lot of work to do. I think the key piece and focus is going to be filling those positions. I do plan to come back to you guys next month to the board for approval of an item that will incorporate both this language changes and some staff augmentations that I'm recommending for this contract. So you should see that on the November agenda.
All right, seeing no other questions. Thank you very much for the presentation. Keep up the good work. Next item is 13 closed session, and we do have one item, and General Counsel Winfrey will take us into closed session.
Yes, sir. So we do have one closed session item pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, Public Employee Performance Evaluation for the Executive Director.
Quigley down under there a couple of times.
All right, Ms. Winfrey, please bring us back from closed session.
Yes, sir. So the board just received a presentation by Mr. Tucker related to agenda item number 13. And as a result of the closed session, the board recommends advancing this item to the full board for consideration at the November board meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Tucker, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I have my executive director report. Yes, it's in the bond. I'm going to read word by word. No, couple of quick points. Absolute work windows. So take a look at that. Just so if someone reaches out to you, key opinion survey. We sent out an email to you all. I know you've received a call from someone attempting to schedule. Please do so. We're looking to complete that by November 1. We are submitting a grant application. Sandag is submitting on our behalf for Breeze Speed and Reliability Plan. This is going to touch our top 10 highest routes. It's a great opportunity for local street improvements, partnering with us. So I will definitely be reaching out with your city manager should we receive that grant. We will be looking to partner with Caltrans in your cities to implement this. And then the last thing is the holiday train event. If you remember last year, we sold that out in 21 minutes and we made a profit. So this year we're double the number of trains, and the weekends are going to be on December 7th and 8th and 14 and 15. We will run 6 trains each day, 10 a.m., noon, and 2 p.m. It's a significant event. It's we have built up a really big following. So we will let you know if we sell out in under 21 minutes again.
Matt, didn't we double them last year too?
I think,
Previously?
and then I think we significantly increased the cost last year, didn't we? Yes.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
it.
Any board members have anything to report?
I attended APTA at the board's expense.
Very good. I hope you learned something.
I did. It was really interesting. I enjoyed the hydrogen fueling information and some other things, but yeah, thanks.
All right, very good. Anthony, do we have any remaining public speakers? All right, the next scheduled meetings are the PAF committee is meeting on November 21st at noon. The special board meeting, November 21st at 1, and a regular board meeting, November 21st at 2 p.m. So we're adjourned until then. Thank you.
Birmingham.